Hello everybody, welcome to the Joe Lemon Show, where today I go over my current LEGO train collection. Hey, you there! I want to remind everybody that if you end up liking this video, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. And right now, YouTube says that over 90% of people that watch my videos aren't subscribed, so it would really help, and with that... Hello everybody, I'm Joel Humming, your guys' host for today's video, where today I'll be taking you guys through my collection of LEGO trains, both from official LEGO sets, customs, and a little bit of the in-between with stuff that just generally doesn't really fit in. So I'm going to go ahead and start this with actually the steamers, and then I will move it sort of towards the left with some city sets here, as well as the customs over there, and then we will make it back there eventually. And mind you, today's video will only include the trains and not the stuff included. But mind you, I do have all the stuff included, and I have actually taken a look at a couple of these LEGO trains on different occasions in case you would want to see some of that. But I'm going to go ahead and start on the far right here with this LEGO Creator Winter Village sort of steam train here, which I would like to say originally this did actually come without power functions, and I did end up sort of converting it to power functions 1.0 with the IR system rather than the Bluetooth system, obviously with the battery box, the receiver, as well as the motor down there. And this one I did find very cute, and I liked it a lot as it was my very first LEGO steamer, and actually one of my first LEGO trains as of date that I actually have here. The only other one that you will see me actually talking about how long I've had it is actually this one here that I have actually had for, I believe, longer than this one, but this one I do remember building this by myself. It was one of the very first sets that I built and still have today. And then right behind the tender there, of course, you do have that little sort of flatbed car with the spinning Christmas tree and a little bit of space to put the presents, which I don't have here because they do tend to get lost easily. And then right behind that, we have sort of like the dining, brake van, caboose, sort of a lot of different things here in the sort of end core. And much like the tender, you do have a little bit of that flower detailing like there. And then you could actually remove the roof of this one and go in there and put the figures and have them do some things in there. And then obviously on the end, you do have a figure there. And then moving to the left of this train, this is actually a unpowered one as of the current date. This is the Hogwarts Express. Now, obviously, this one is a bit special when it comes to where it actually comes from. Because, of course, Creator and things like the Disney train here do actually have a lot more to them. But the Hogwarts Express train is actually one of the only sort of versions from its series. Now, obviously, there's a lot here, but this is one of the ones that it is actually one of the main sets of very limited amount of things here, with unlike the sort of main series where LEGO can kind of infinitely produce these as designers come out with new ones. But this one is a bit more special to me for that reason, and obviously it being mainly red as well as having some pretty large wheels here is another plus for me. Now, obviously, as I said, this is a dummy sort of train. It doesn't really have any power to it, unlike this one that I did, was I able to convert with the instructions to convert it to Power Functions 1.0 with the IR system. This one does not have instructions to be converted, so it is still a dummy one until I have the parts to do the conversion. But as of right now, this is just a dummy engine and a tender, unlike the sort of whatever you call it, the Disney train, as well as the Creator train here, which do have the tenders actually doing a bit of the work. But this one, even the general whole entire locomotive area is just dummy sort of space. It doesn't really have anything there. It is just sort of like a freewheeler. And then here we have the sort of passenger coach, which, like the end coach on the Creator train, you could remove the roof and do a little bit of figure work in there. And then you could also remove this sort of cart and play around with it. You have a little chocolate frog on there that just simply slipped in between the two sets of chairs, which were actually brick built, mind you. And then right next to that, we have my favorite Lego train out of everyone that I'll be showing today. This is the Lego Disney train. And obviously, I do like this one quite a lot for the roots of the locomotive, going back to some American-style locomotives back when things like maybe the Cross-Continental Railroad were actually being built due to Walt Disney's inspiration for his locomotives, as well as the mass amount of color due to the actual locomotive that this individual actual model is based off of. Well, actually, not this individual, just this model, but this actual model from that Lego set here. And yeah, so this one, as I had mentioned, I do like for many reasons, even well, it is generally blends in with the mass amount of color here, but due to this being a Disney train, that does add another plus for me, because my family is actually a bit of a Disney fan, if you did not know. And then here, as I mentioned many times while I was talking about the Hogwarts Express, the tender does actually do a bit of the work, actually in this case, all of the work, due to the confined and a new Power Up 2.0 system that actually does incorporate the receiver into the battery box area, and then the motor being the only other component there at the bottom. And like the Hogwarts Express, the locomotive actually, technically speaking, is just like a dummy thing and doesn't really serve much purpose other than to look quite pleasing, if you do ask me. And then here, obviously, well, as I had just discussed the tender, you do have everything in there, and then some stickers on the side. And then here is like the gondola, covered blue holiday car. Got some seats in there. You could open the tops and put your figures in there and stuff like that. And then right behind that is actually the Lily Bell, which, if you didn't know, actually, as it turns out, is named after Walt Disney's wife. And as it turns out, apparently, according to my mom's knowledge, I actually rode in this coach in real life when I was about 2. Didn't know that, but it is quite interesting. And this one I would like to mention, if you notice, this is actually quite a large coach. It is a little bit short compared to the actual real life version, but it is very wide compared to your typical Lego train. As you can see here, if I set this right behind the passenger coach for the Hogwarts Express, you can see that generally I do categorize Legos as like a hobby for myself. But actually in this case, this looks like a toy compared to this, even well, they both do categorize as a hobby thing in my mind. But this one, being a typical Lego train size, only being 6 studs wide, does literally look like a toy compared to the wide basis of the Disney train coaches. And then that is all of the steamers. So there is the Disney train, Hogwarts Express, and the Creator Village, or Christmas Village train there. And then moving over here to the left, we actually have some diesels and diesel electric city freight trains. So this is the 2018 freight train that came out most recently, of course, for the city line. And this was the first to one of the first actually, to introduce the power functions or power up system to the Lego train a thing, as this general technology did actually exist before I made it to the Lego trains, as far as I know. This one did actually have a dual cab with it being on both sides. You can flip up the roof. You've got some nice detailing there on the side, and you can put your figures in and whatnot. And then behind that, you had a log car with a little bit of a thief there. And then behind that, you've got the crane, which could rotate. You could raise and lower the boom, and you could extend and pull in the line there with these knobs, all over the place. And then you did actually have some arms that come out the sides that do actually give you a bit more stability. And then here we actually have like a flatbed with a couple things, one of them being a little box with a Antarctic ski in there. And then here we actually have a safe car that is able to open up, and with the rest of the stuff in the set, you would actually be able to put some things in there, which I don't have the rest of the things from these sets here today. But anyway, moving on, here we actually have a slightly older, or actually rather comparatively older Lego freight train. This is actually the Heavy Hauler red freight train. I don't know the exact year to this one, but it is still one of my favorites, as I did realize this a while ago. But you do actually end up having Christmas colors with these ones, actually, with the green and the red, which this is actually my best friend Deegan's favorite color, and this is my favorite color, red. And then right behind that, obviously, you did have the second cabin, and this one, obviously, well, actually not so obviously, did go back to, well, sort of messing up my sentence there. Going from the looking at a locomotive with the 2.0 sort of version of the power functions, this one actually had the sort of first version of the power functions for the Lego trains, at least what we call the first version, even though there were technically some things before that. And then, well, if I don't break this thing, we can go ahead and flip down the cabin sort of mold pieces for the dual-ended cabins, getting these to go down real quick. And then this did obviously use some of the larger plates there on the side, unlike the ones over here. And right behind that, we had a flatbed car with a helicopter, which I did quite like when I was building this, as, well, helicopters and flying things in general do tend to fascinate me a little bit. Obviously not more than trains, though. And then here we have another flatbed car. This is a little flatbed car that can actually hold a little tractor that you could make with the set. And this one I did actually quite like, because I do like construction and the vehicles associated with that. And behind that, we did actually have a little hopper car. This one actually, once again, it was one of my favorites, as I do like the general sort of structurally sound feel of this. It's not like your just flatbed sort of basic feel of these guys. You actually get a bit of a brick built car there rather than the large plates and sort of bases being used. And then that is actually going to finish it off for all of my Lego sets. Now, I do apologize for the bit of rambling. I do tend to, my mind is actually working on a bit of a sort of review stance. I'm sorry if I over-explain a couple things, but with that being said, we can go ahead and move away from official Lego sets to actually my customs. Now, these ones I do only have 2 currently, and I actually haven't built any recently because I have been working on a lot of other things, and obviously running out of pieces is obviously a big problem for me right now. But this is actually my military sort of train, as you can see here. This is the oldest sort of custom that is here, obviously out of the, well, only 2 that are actually here. This is the military sort of engine, and then that is actually the sort of military coach. Now, obviously, these don't actually look like any sort of thing that you'd see out of any sort of army, U.S. Army, UK Army, anything like that. This is just sort of what I was calling the actual military train. At least that's what I was calling that sort of series that I'd wanted to start. But obviously, after a while, ran out of pieces and started to do things that looked a bit more like that. But you did have an interior, and this did use the 1.0 version of power functions due to when I actually built this. The 2.0 version had actually not made it to Lego trains yet, and in many cases actually didn't exist yet. And then moving back to this coach, it in many ways actually does relate in a design perspective to the actual locomotive. As you can see here with the same red stripe running along the top, you've got the same sort of door on the side, even well, actually, as it turns out, the glass is a different color. You've actually got a figure hanging out in there with a walkie-talkie or something, I don't know. And then we do have the magnetic couplers that just allow them to stick up to each other, nothing too special. And then, yeah, so there is that first custom locomotive and its train core. And then here is actually the scrap train. This is one that was towards the end of me actually building customs as of the current date. So you'll see a lot more of smaller pieces sort of substituting where some larger bricks would usually go, such as some plates here actually going in place of what I would actually like to be bricks. But due to the lack of pieces towards the time that this was actually being built, I did end up having to do a lot of modifications. But this one did have a little bit of a plow on the front. As you can see, it did exist with the front truck, which did actually have 3 sets of wheels, or 3 axles. And that is actually taking inspiration from this one, which once again did have a front thing that moved with 3 axles there on the front once again. And then this, much like the military locomotive, does also use the 1.0 version of Lego Power Functions, with the battery box being there, the receiver being sort of hidden in there, and obviously the sort of motor back of there. And then this one was a bit more of an experimental thing for me. It's just sort of built as I was going, so you do get a lot of random things going on. Like in here, we actually do have a little bit of a room. If I can get this to open, you could actually put figures in different places that typically weren't actually accessible to other builds, such as this, as portions of this, as you can see, are actually 8 studs wide. So you could actually put some figures in there, which I actually intended for figures to be looking sort of out of these windows, looking out that way, sort of in like maybe a outro shot, but I actually ended up never really doing that. And then it's not really easy to tell, but we do actually have a separate little sort of coach thing here on the back that is actually connected with some little sort of rods going through the back of the locomotive there. And this was meant to relate back to this, which is actually supposed to be an antenna, which apparently I'm good at breaking things today. But as you can see, this one did actually end up being fairly small when connected up to the back of the locomotive. And then moving to the last bit of today's video, it will not take very much time to explain, as this is technically speaking a official LEGO thing. This is sort of like the center coach to actually a LEGO passenger train, one of the 2 passenger trains that I did have when I was a bit younger, and obviously, well, typically with being a younger age and having Legos, they didn't really make it through, well, me aging as I did destroy them through mid-life, I guess. And, well, this is one of the ones that somehow magically made it through and still exists today. And typically, due to its colors, I do actually stick it up next to the military train just due to it being red and white. But due to this living on for so long, I do keep this one together. And as I had sort of implied earlier, or maybe with a different recording, I guess, that will actually be going with a LEGO set that I will actually might be getting semi-soon, which I will actually be getting that white passenger train hopefully again soon to go along with that, as on eBay I actually did end up finding a very great deal with a new and a sort of complete set for only about $50 US, which is why I'm sort of mentioning that there. But this one you could open up the top and put in figures, and once again, just like the Hogwarts Express passenger coach, this was 6 studs wide, which once again put up right behind the Lily Bell. Looks absolutely tiny and weird, because typically in real life these style of sort of presidential coaches were actually smaller than this sort of modern streamline sort of I guess high-speed train coach, and it's weird that here in LEGO form it's literally the other way around. But with that being said, I do apologize for the video being a little bit longer. I did ramble on a little bit, and I do apologize for that. Hopefully you guys made it through the video. But if you guys did make it through, if you guys enjoyed today's video,